You there, champagne, now. The words cracked across the Aurelia Conservatory gala like a whip, not whispered, declared. A white-haired matriarch of the Sterling Hawthorne dynasty extended her glass, sharp rings catching the glow. Around her, sons and grandsons in tailored suits erupted in laughter. One snapped his fingers as if summoning a maid, and in the center of their gaze stood Selah Monroe. Pale rose silk hugged her frame. No jewels, no glitter, no entourage. She didn't need them. The phone at her ear was quiet, waiting. Her face, still as glass, calm as a loaded chamber. The crowd's laughter rippled outward, bouncing off marble floors and mirrored walls. A younger Sterling leaned forward, smirking. Every event needs servers, I suppose, even here. More chuckles, more eyes turning, more mouths curling at the edges. Selah didn't flinch. Her silence wasn't submission, it was precision. Every second she waited, the room tightened, like air sucked through a narrow crack. And then, at the very edge of the laughter, her voice cut through, low and absolute. Pull our capital. Move the 940 million alliance to Orpheus. Effective now. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They landed like verdicts, like marble blocks crashing onto marble floors. A waiter froze mid-step. A photographer lowered his lens. The music stumbled but didn't stop, yet the air shifted, charged, as if the orchestra itself knew the script had changed. One of the Sterling men chuckled nervously, trying to claw back control. Did she just... But Selah wasn't performing for them. Her gaze was locked, steel steady, on the woman with the raised champagne flute. The phone at her ear flickered alive with a voice. Understood, Miss Monroe. Atlas Protocol initiated. And the laughter that had filled the hall fractured. This wasn't a servant. This wasn't background. This was the woman they'd flown across oceans to impress. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Selah. Because tonight wasn't about champagne, it was about legacy. And in that moment, the dynasty that mocked her was watching a billion-dollar future slip from their hands, delivered not with shouting, not with anger, but with one calm command. The gasp came before the music could recover. The hall glittered, but Selah Monroe didn't. She wasn't draped in diamonds. She wasn't flanked by bodyguards. She wasn't announced with trumpets like the others who paraded into Meridian Hall tonight. Her gown was pale, rose silk, understated, almost quiet against the sea of sequins and satin. To the untrained eye, she blended into the background, just another guest in a city of wealth. That was deliberate. Selah had never believed power needed to scream. She had learned long ago that silence, when held correctly, could be the loudest sound in a room. The dynasty laughing at her now, the Sterling Hawthorns, had no idea. To them, she was invisible until she was convenient. A backdrop, a target, a mistaken server. But she had built an empire on being underestimated. Behind the calm on her face, history flickered. At 24, she'd walked into a banking conference in Atlanta, portfolio in hand, only to be asked if she was lost. At 29, she entered a boardroom in London to lead negotiations, only for a junior associate to shove her coat at her, mistaking her for staff. She hadn't yelled then either. She had taken notes, and every insult became a brick in the empire she built. Now that empire stretched across continents, finance, real estate, energy, and tonight this glittering gala, the $940M Alliance, was supposed to cement her group's partnership with the Sterlings. It was supposed to be the celebration of a decade-long climb. Instead, champagne was held out to her like a command. The irony wasn't lost on her. Across the hall, a young man balanced a tray of glasses. His name tag caught the light: Miguel Aranda, junior catering staff. His eyes flicked from Selah to the circle of billionaires mocking her. He hesitated, shoulders tightening, before quietly shifting his phone out of his pocket. The red recording light glowed. He wasn't the only one watching. Near the stage, a journalist, Jules Park, credential badge tucked half-hidden in her clutch, had already angled her phone between two champagne flutes. She didn't know Selah, not yet, but she knew the look on Selah's face. The kind of composure that wasn't submission, but a storm biding its time. The orchestra swelled, violins singing over tension that no melody could smooth. Guests shifted, some uncomfortable, some entertained. Power, after all, was its own performance, and the Sterling Hawthorns were used to owning the spotlight. Selah let them have their moment. She stood still, phone at her ear, voice soft, her words meant for one line only: Atlas Protocol, execute transfer. Somewhere, far from this glittering hall, systems moved, screens lit, markets stirred. The ripple had begun, even if the room didn't know it yet. The Dynasty thought they were laughing at a stranger. They didn't realize they were mocking the woman who held the pen over their future. And Selah, she wasn't here for champagne. She was here to remind them that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding the detonator. The orchestra carried on, bows gliding as if nothing had happened. But the air in Meridian Hall was different now. Thick, brittle, charged. The matriarch of the Sterling Hawthorne dynasty tilted her glass, the liquid trembling in the light. Strange, she said loudly enough for a half-circle of guests to hear. Even at charity galas, standards used to matter. The words weren't an observation. They were a declaration, a dagger wrapped in etiquette. Her eldest son, Marcus, laughed on cue. He was broad, tailored, slicked hair shining with champagne glow. He leaned forward, eyes on Selah. Which catering firm sent you? Don't be shy. A quick answer. Maybe we'll tip. The chuckles rose again, bouncing off marble floors like pebbles thrown against glass. A younger Sterling cousin snapped his fingers once, sharp, as if commanding a dog. Selah did not move. Her phone stayed at her ear, but she hadn't spoken a word since Atlas Protocol. Her stillness was louder than their laughter. The way she stood straight, grounded, shoulders steady, was the kind of poise that unsettled those who didn't understand it. The matriarch's pearls glinted. She leaned closer, her perfume cutting the air. Sweetheart, this hall is for investors, not staff. Do you understand? Behind her, a ripple of reaction ran through the guests. Some laughed, some smirked, but not all. At the edge of the crowd, a woman in emerald silk whispered to her husband, "That's cruel." He didn't answer, but his jaw tightened. Near the catering line, Miguel Aranda's phone angled higher. His hand shook slightly, but the red recording dot never wavered. By the stage, Jules Park's breath caught. She was still pretending to be casual, drink in hand, phone half hidden. But her journalist's eye saw what others missed. Selah's silence wasn't defeat, it was calculation. Marcus lifted his glass higher, voice booming now. "Let me guess. You snuck in hoping no one would notice until the champagne ran dry. Clever move." Selah's eyes flicked once, slowly, toward him. Not anger, not fear. Just the kind of look that makes a man's voice stumble half a beat. He forced a laugh anyway, louder this time, filling the cracks his nerves had just opened. "Security!" Another Sterling barked. His command carried across the hall, echoing against gold balconies. A uniformed guard at the far entrance shifted uncomfortably, caught between duty and hesitation. The matriarch smirked, raising her voice once more so no one could miss it. "You're holding up the event. People of value are waiting." Gasps fluttered around the edges of the hall, small, shocked, sounds too soft to drown the orchestra, but too sharp to ignore. Some guests glanced away, unwilling to be complicit. Others leaned in, eager to witness humiliation dressed as tradition. Selah remained motionless. The champagne light poured over her like she was carved into the marble itself, one hand at her side, one hand holding the phone. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't defended herself, hadn't broken her stillness. And that stillness, it frightened them more than any outburst ever could. The laughter didn't fade, it fractured. It echoed, then wavered, like glass under pressure. Selah Monroe stood at the center of it, untouched. Not by accident, by choice. Her spine didn't bend, her shoulders didn't twitch. The phone at her ear was still, her lips parted only slightly as if she could speak at any moment, but refused to give them the timing they wanted. Silence as strategy. It wasn't the first time she'd used it. Years ago, in a boardroom in Chicago, an executive had called her assistant 3 times in front of 20 men. She hadn't corrected him. She had let the silence stretch until he realized his mistake when her signature landed across a $300M acquisition. The embarrassment had traveled further than any retort. Tonight was no different. The Sterling Hawthorns had thrown their words like darts. Server, staff, doesn't belong. Each one hung in the air, waiting to puncture. But Selah didn't flinch. She let the darts fall short, clattering harmlessly against the marble floor of her composure. A woman in emerald silk near the front whispered again, louder this time. She hasn't said a word. Her husband shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting to the phones now raised discreetly in the crowd. They weren't alone. Guests along the balcony leaned forward, their whispers threading together. Who is she? Why isn't she reacting? And the more Selah refused to answer, the more their voices filled the void. Miguel Aranda, balancing his tray against the wall, whispered under his breath, "She's not afraid." His camera caught every frame, the mocking gestures, the matriarch's smug pearls, Marcus's smirk and Selah, unmoving. Near the stage, Jules Park's lens trembled in her hand. She mouthed, "This is different." Because it was. Most targets of ridicule protested. Most tried to defend themselves. Selah didn't, and in that refusal, she shifted the room. The Sterling matriarch leaned forward, her words cutting like broken glass. "Why so quiet? Lost your tongue?" Selah's gaze lifted, slow, deliberate. Her eyes locked with the older woman's steady, calm, unshaken. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence itself was a mirror, and in it, the matriarch saw her own cruelty reflected back, sharper than any rebuttal. The orchestra played on, oblivious or pretending to be, but even their notes seemed thinner now, stretched taut over a crowd that wasn't laughing as easily as before. A ripple of unease had spread. The performance was losing its stage. One Sterling cousin hissed, "Say something!" His tone cracked on the last word, revealing impatience. Selah finally moved, but only enough to press the phone closer to her ear. Her expression remained calm, carved in marble. A faint nod, as if she were listening to something beyond them all. Her silence was no longer empty. It was heavy, intentional, like a verdict waiting to drop. And that more than any shouted defense was what silenced the next round of laughter. The chandeliers still glowed, the violins still played, but something had shifted. The laughter that once rolled so freely now landed awkward, brittle, like a performance that had gone too long. Selah Monroe hadn't moved. That stillness had become the center of the room, drawing eyes, bending the air. And people noticed, near the catering line, Miguel Aranda gripped his phone tighter, thumb hovering over the record button, already glowing red. He whispered into the lens, voice low but firm. "This isn't right. You're all seeing this." His tray leaned against the wall now, abandoned. He wasn't serving drinks anymore. He was serving evidence. At the far edge of the ballroom, Jules Park lifted her clutch a fraction higher, her phone camera peeking through crystal glasses. She whispered to her mic, breath unsteady but resolute. "We're live at the Aurelia Conservatory Gala. Something ugly is happening." Her stream counter ticked upward. Dozens became hundreds. The chat lit with disbelief, with anger, with support. Guests closest to the Sterling Hawthorns shifted in their seats. Some leaned away, uncomfortable at being caught in the glare of so many lenses. A man in a navy suit muttered, "Phones are out. This isn't private anymore." His wife tugged at his sleeve, hissing, "Then stop laughing." The orchestra faltered for half a beat, one violin slipping sharp before recovering. Even they felt it the way the room no longer belonged to the dynasty at its center. Selah's silence had created a vacuum, and others were filling it. A gray-haired woman near the balcony leaned over to her companion. "I've stayed at Monroe Holdings Properties. That's her. That's Selah." The words spread in a ripple, quiet but insistent. Recognition traveled faster than denial. Miguel's camera caught the moment Marcus Sterling smirked again, lifting his champagne. "Careful," he sneered. "Phones aren't allowed during service." His attempt at humor landed flat. Too many eyes had shifted from amusement to scrutiny. Too many red dots were glowing. The matriarch's pearls flashed as she snapped, "Put those away. This is private." Her command ricocheted, but it was already too late. Once a camera lens catches cruelty, privacy is a myth. Jules's stream rolled, her voice steadying as adrenaline overtook fear. She hasn't said a word, Jules narrated, and they've already tried to erase her. Comments surged across her screen. Name her. Protect her. We see you. Selah didn't look at the phones. She didn't acknowledge the whispers. Her silence remained unbroken, deliberate, anchoring the chaos spinning outward. But the Sterling Hawthorns noticed. The matriarch's jaw tightened. Marcus's smirk faltered. The younger cousins whispered harshly between themselves. It's being filmed. End it. Now, the power they'd worn like tailored suits was slipping, thread by thread, under the weight of witness. And Selah, still calm, still silent, stood in the center, letting the room decide what it wanted to remember, the laughter of the powerful or the dignity of the one they mocked. The choice was already being made. The strings of the orchestra fluttered, thin as thread, almost lost under the rising murmur of voices. The Sterling Hawthorne dynasty could feel it. Their laughter no longer echoed the way it once had. It didn't ripple, it didn't command. It scraped, brittle, against the weight of dozens of watching eyes and glowing phones. So, they pushed harder. The matriarch's pearls swung as she straightened, her tone sharpened to pierce the entire ballroom. This spectacle has gone far enough. Someone remove her. Her words carried like a gavel. Heads turned. A security guard at the entrance stiffened, caught in the net of expectation. Marcus Sterling raised his glass high, forcing a grin. You've had your fun, sweetheart. This is an investor's gala. And you, he paused, letting the silence lean toward cruelty, don't look like an investor to me. The younger cousin smirked, plucking a folded event program from a nearby table. With exaggerated care, he held it toward Selah as though it were a boarding pass. Here, he said loudly, maybe this one will prove you belong. Then, with a quick flick of his hands, he tore it in half. The sound, a crisp rip of paper cut sharper than the violin bow in the corner. Gasps flared across the room. A few guests winced. Phones zoomed in, lenses tracking the fragments fluttering to the marble floor like confetti from a party no one wanted. Selah didn't move, not an inch. Miguel's voice trembled as he narrated into his phone. They're tearing credentials, calling her out. But she's still standing. On the balcony, a guest muttered under his breath. That's not staff. That's Monroe Holdings. I've seen her picture. His companion hissed. Then why aren't you saying it louder? But neither stepped forward. Not yet. Jules Park's stream counter doubled, comments flooding in. They know who she is. Expose them. Don't let them bury her. The matriarch's lips curved into a brittle smile. She turned to the guard. Escort her out. Now. The guard hesitated. He had heard the laughter, seen the paper torn, watched the phones rise like witnesses in a courtroom. He shifted his weight, eyes flicking to Selah, then back to the dynasty that commanded him. Selah met his stare steady, unyielding, but not pleading. She didn't need to beg. She simply existed in her stillness, and in that stillness, the guard felt the weight of choice pressing down. Marcus leaned in closer, voice like a blade. Why are you still here? If you belong, prove it. If not, get out before we make you. The hall was no longer laughing. It was holding its breath, split between cruelty and conscience. The dynasty had escalated. The stage was set, and Selah, calm, silent, immovable, was letting them dig the hole deeper. The orchestra faltered again, this time not from clumsy fingers, but from hesitation. Notes thinned, bows trembled. Every eye in Meridian Hall was fixed on the tableau at its center. Selah Monroe, still unmoving, still silent, and the dynasty circling her, growing restless. Their power had always lived in noise, applause, laughter, applause again. But silence? Silence made them desperate. The Sterling matriarch broke first. She stepped forward, heels clicking against marble, the sound sharp enough to hush nearby whispers. With a slow, deliberate motion, she extended her half-full glass of champagne. Since you refuse to serve, she said, her voice loud enough to fill the gilded ceiling, you might as well hold this. She pressed the crystal stem toward Selah's hand. The gesture wasn't just rude, it was ownership dressed as politeness, humiliation wrapped in etiquette. The matriarch's smile was thin, triumphant. Selah didn't lift a finger. The refusal was silent, but absolute. Gasps rippled. A man in the second row muttered, "She's testing her." Another whispered back, "No, she's provoking her." Marcus Sterling, face tight with performance, chuckled and added fuel. He plucked another flute of champagne from a passing tray and shoved it toward Selah. "Double the service. Maybe she'll learn faster with practice." His laughter rang hollow, but he forced it anyway, pushing the cruelty forward. When Selah still didn't move, Marcus's smile cracked. The desperation behind it showed, so he escalated. He leaned closer, snapping his fingers just inches from her face. The sharp sound echoed through the hush. "Did you hear me? Or do you only move when tipped?" Phones rose higher. Jules Park whispered into her stream, voice shaking. "They're putting glasses in her hands. They're snapping at her. This is—" She stopped herself. Words failed. Miguel's phone trembled in his grip, but he didn't stop recording. "This isn't just disrespect," he whispered. "This is humiliation." The younger Sterling cousin joined in, laughing too loudly. He reached across the space between them, grabbed a folded napkin, and tried to press it into Selah's palm. "Here," he sneered. "At least wipe the tables. Do something useful." The hall recoiled. Even those who had smiled earlier shifted back, discomfort plain on their faces. A woman in emerald silk clutched her husband's arm, whispering, "This is too far." The matriarch's glass hovered, still extended, her voice slicing, "Hold it, or leave. Those are your options." Selah finally moved just enough to adjust the phone at her ear. Her eyes rose, steady, locking on the matriarch's face. She still didn't touch the glass. She didn't touch the napkin. The silence that followed was suffocating, heavy, absolute. And for the first time that night, the Sterling Hawthorns looked unsure. Because in that stillness, surrounded by gasps, cameras, and whispers, it became clear. The woman they thought they could humiliate wasn't shrinking. She was waiting for the moment to end them with nothing more than her voice. The crystal stem of the matriarch's glass still hovered in the air, trembling now not from her hand, but from the silence pressing down on the room. Marcus's smirk had stiffened. The cousin's laughter had cracked. Even the orchestra had let the last note fade, bows hanging motionless in midair. Selah Monroe shifted the phone in her hand. The simple act, small, precise, drew every eye. She inhaled once, slowly, as though weighing the value of silence one final time. Then her voice came, low and deliberate, each word striking harder than champagne against crystal. "Atlas Protocol. Confirm transfer. Full withdrawal." The sentence was not loud. It didn't need to be. It cut through the hall sharper than any command the Dynasty had barked all night. A pause followed, electric, then the faint crackle of a voice on the other end of her line. "Confirmed, Miss Monroe. 940 million moved. To Orpheus Capital. Legal notified. Markets updated." The words detonated in the silence. The matriarch's smile faltered, her glass dipping. Marcus blinked, his smirk collapsing mid-performance. Around them, gasps erupted, guests choking on disbelief, on recognition, on the sudden realization that the staff they had mocked had just shifted nearly $1 billion with a single call. Jules Park's camera trembled in her hand, her whisper turning into a near shout. "Did you hear that? She just moved 940 million. This isn't a bluff. This is live." Her comments feed exploded. "She's the real one. Respect, power, justice in real time." Miguel's breath caught audibly on his recording. She's the deal. She's the alliance." The security guard who had stepped forward froze mid-stride. His eyes darted between Selah and the Dynasty, suddenly unsure which side of history he was standing on. His hesitation said everything. Selah lowered the phone slightly, enough for her next words to carry. Calm, cold, controlled. "You thought I was here to pour your drinks. You never considered I was here to pour your fate into someone else's hands." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The truth inside it did all the work. The matriarch's pearls quivered as her lips parted, searching for a reply that wouldn't come. Marcus fumbled, his glass clinking against the tray as he set it down too fast. The cousin who had handed her a napkin let it slip from his hand, fluttering uselessly to the floor. The balance of the room shifted. No longer ridicule, no longer silence. It was gravity, pulled toward Selah. In the corners, Guests who had whispered doubts now whispered names. Monroe Holdings. Selah Monroe. That's her. Recognition spread like sparks. Selah pressed the phone back to her ear, her tone unchanged, steady as steel. Notify compliance. Shut every Sterling Hawthorne access point. Effective immediately. The voice on the other end, already in progress. And just like that, their power began collapsing in real time. The Dynasty hadn't realized until too late. The woman they mocked wasn't the server of champagne. She was the server of consequences. And she had just started pouring. The silence that followed her last command wasn't empty. It was loaded. Every guest in Meridian Hall felt it press against their ribs, that invisible weight of a moment tipping. The Sterling Hawthornes, so loud, so sure, suddenly looked small. The matriarch lowered her glass without realizing it, her pearls trembling against her throat. Marcus glanced at his phone, at the flicker of notifications lighting up, his smirk gone, replaced by a crack of fear. Selah Monroe finally lowered her own phone. For the first time that evening, she let the room have her full voice. I am not staff, I am not service, and I am not silent because I'm afraid. Her gaze swept the circle of tuxedos and gowns that had mocked her. Each word was measured, precise, dropping like stones into water. My name is Selah Monroe, CEO of Monroe Holdings, architect of the $940 million alliance you came here to secure. The contract you toasted an hour ago. She paused, letting the words hang as gasps echoed across the marble, was mine to grant, and just now, it was mine to take away. Phones lifted higher. Gasps turned to whispers, whispers to shock. Miguel mouthed the name, repeating it as though it explained everything. Selah Monroe. I knew it. His camera shook, but his voice carried awe. Jules Park's live stream lit up, the chat screaming with recognition. She owns it. She owns them. Respect. Justice. Jules's breath hitched as she said into her mic, she's not staff, she's the deal. She's the one they flew here to impress. The matriarch blinked hard, lips parting. That's impossible. Selah's eyes locked on her, unflinching. Impossible? You sat across from my team for 6 months. You paraded into meetings begging for my signature. You signed your name beside mine, and still you looked at me tonight and saw a servant. She took a single step forward, her heels echoing. The Dynasty involuntarily shifted back. You don't recognize me because you never wanted to. You only see what flatters you. Tonight, that blindness cost you nearly $1 billion. The words detonated. A wave of murmurs surged through the hall. Investors craned necks. Guests clutched pearls. Phones tilted to capture every angle of the collapse. The security guard, caught mid-order, dropped his gaze. He took a step back, not away from Selah, but away from the Dynasty who had summoned him. Even he understood the lines had redrawn. Selah's voice sharpened, not raised, but honed to a blade. You mistook me for service, but the truth is, she paused, her eyes cutting through their circle. I own the service. I own the walls around you. I own the contract you thought defined you. A beat of silence, then applause. Small at first, from the woman in emerald silk, then growing, spreading like wildfire. Palms clapping, voices rising, the sound breaking the Dynasty's grip on the room. Selah stood in the center, the quietest presence, now the loudest truth. And the Dynasty, once untouchable, was exposed, humiliated, powerless, under the weight of the reveal. The sound of applause didn't just fill Meridian Hall, it fractured it. The gold-leafed ceiling, the chandeliers, the marble floor all seemed to reverberate with the sudden swell. What had once been a stage for the Sterling Hawthornes now belonged to Selah Monroe. The matriarch stiffened, clutching her pearls like armor, her voice trembling as she tried to shout over the clapping. Silence! This is our gala, our contract. But her words dissolved under the weight of the crowd. Guests weren't laughing anymore. They were watching, judging, whispering names like Scripture, Selah Monroe, Monroe Holdings, the woman who moved $940 million with a single call. Marcus Sterling fumbled his phone from his pocket, thumb darting across the screen. Notifications poured in headlines, alerts, Updates. His face drained of color. It can't be, he muttered, but the glow of his screen betrayed him. Orpheus Capital announces new strategic alliance with Monroe Holdings. The cousin who had shoved a napkin at Selah only minutes ago now shrank back, his eyes darting toward the exits. The arrogance that once animated his smirk melted into panic. Cameras caught everything. Jules Park's live stream surged past 50,000 viewers, comments exploding in real time. "They're finished. She's untouchable. Watch them squirm." Jules's voice trembled with adrenaline as she narrated, "The dynasty that mocked her just lost everything. Live, in front of everyone." Miguel whispered into his phone, "This is justice." The orchestra had stopped completely now, instruments lowered, musicians frozen mid-note. Even they knew the performance had shifted, that the true stage was no longer theirs. The matriarch's voice cracked as she barked at the security guard. "Remove her, now!" But the guard didn't move. His eyes locked on Selah, then drifted back to the cameras, to the rising wave of applause. He wasn't risking his career on the wrong side of history. He stepped back instead, the gesture small but unmistakable. Selah took a single step forward, her heels slicing the silence between applause. Her voice was calm, steady, unshaken. "You asked who I was. Now you know, and so does everyone else." Her words carried, amplified by the dozens of phones capturing her from every angle. The dynasty was shrinking, boxed in by their own arrogance and the eyes of the world. The applause swelled again, joined now by cheers. A woman near the stage stood, clapping with both hands. A man in a navy suit followed. Soon, the hall was alive with the sound, half astonishment, half defiance, all directed against the Sterling Hawthorns. Marcus's voice cracked as he tried one last time. "This is a bluff. She's lying." But another guest cut him off, holding up his own phone. "The press just confirmed it. She owns the alliance. You lost." The dynasty's faces drained of power. Their empire had crumbled in a matter of minutes. Selah didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply stood in the storm she had unleashed, her presence commanding the room. And for the first time in their long, gilded history, the Sterling Hawthorns weren't the ones writing the narrative. They were the headline. The applause didn't die. It grew, a steady rhythm like a drum beat, pounding against the walls of Meridian Hall. The Sterling Hawthorns stood stranded in the center, their polished arrogance slipping into visible fear. Selah Monroe raised the phone to her ear once more. Calm, precise. She didn't shout over the noise. She didn't need to. Her voice carried because the room wanted to hear her. Effective immediately. Revoke Sterling Hawthorn access across all Monroe Holdings accounts. Freeze their portfolios. Cancel pending transfers. Notify every partner in our network that the dynasty is blacklisted. The line crackled back within seconds. Confirmed, Miss Monroe. Legal and compliance are already executing. The matriarch staggered a half-step forward, her pearls trembling against her collarbone. You can't. Selah's gaze cut her off. "I just did." Marcus pulled at his tie, sweat dampening his temples. He turned his phone toward his cousin, screen glowing with the confirmation press release from Orpheus Capital. The headline blared. Monroe Holdings severs ties with Sterling Hawthorn Dynasty, effective tonight. Phones across the ballroom lit in unison. Guests gasped as push notifications buzzed in their pockets. One man whispered to his wife, "Their accounts are locked." Another added, "Suppliers won't touch them after this. They're radioactive." Jules Park's stream surged past 100,000 live viewers. Her voice broke with disbelief. "You're watching history. Selah Monroe just blacklisted one of the oldest dynasties in America. Effective now. This isn't corporate rumor, it's fact," Miguel whispered hoarsely. "She ended them." The matriarch reached toward the security guard again, desperate. "Stop her. Do something." But the guard didn't move. He wasn't her shield anymore. His silence was its own verdict. Selah lowered the phone and finally addressed the dynasty directly, her voice soft but razor-sharp. "For generations, you've profited from power you didn't earn. Tonight, you lost it in the time it takes to snap your fingers at someone you thought was beneath you." Gasps, applause, murmurs. Phones caught every word. Marcus's cousin whispered frantically. "We can salvage this. Call the board. Call—" "No," the matriarch snapped, her voice cracking. "It's too late. Look at them." Her eyes swept the hall, rows of investors already stepping back, partners turning away, allies evaporating like mist. Selah took a step closer, her presence towering without volume. "You wanted to see service from me? Consider this your service. Justice, delivered swiftly, efficiently, publicly." Her words detonated, leaving no space for rebuttal. The applause swelled again, joined by cheers, by phones raised higher, by voices chanting her name, Selah Monroe. And in that sound, the sterling hawthorns crumbled not just in business, not just in finance, but in dignity. They were erased from the room they thought they owned. Selah stood tall, her command final, her power undeniable. She hadn't raised her voice once, and still she had silenced them forever. The ballroom was no longer theirs. The chandeliers still shone, but their light no longer crowned the Sterling Hawthorne dynasty. It wrapped instead around Selah Monroe, illuminating her not as a guest, not as a servant, but as the undeniable center of power. The applause had settled into a steady rhythm, less frantic now, more reverent, the kind of clapping that marked not entertainment, but history. Guests no longer looked at the dynasty. They looked through them, already erasing them from memory. The matriarch's pearls hung heavy, her face drawn. Marcus clutched his useless phone like a lifeline, his cousin shifting in silence. Their arrogance collapsed into dust. Selah didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply turned, her gown trailing across the marble, each step measured, deliberate. The crowd parted before her, instinctive, respectful. At the base of the staircase, she paused. Her eyes swept the room one last time, the phones raised, the faces awed, the dynasty broken. She lifted the microphone from the podium, her voice steady, resonant without needing to rise. "You thought I was here to serve you drinks. You thought my silence was weakness. But silence isn't submission, it's strategy. And tonight, it served you justice." Gasps, then cheers. She let the words hang, a blade suspended in the air, then lowered the microphone back onto the podium with calm finality. The sound echoed a soft click, yet louder than the dynasty's entire empire collapsing. Behind her, Miguel whispered into his phone. She owned the room. Jules Park's live-stream comments blazed with fire emojis, fists, clapping hands. "This is justice. This is history. This is how dignity wins." Selah didn't look back. She didn't need to. Her verdict had been delivered. The dynasty had already been sentenced by her voice, by her command, by the weight of their own arrogance caught on camera. At the doors, she paused once more, glancing over her shoulder. The matriarch met her gaze, pearls trembling against a throat that had once barked orders without question. Selah's voice was soft, final. "You wanted me gone. Congratulations. I'm leaving. And I'm taking your future with me." The room erupted, cheers, claps, voices chanting her name. Selah Monroe walked through it all with the same calm she had held from the beginning. No raised fists, no shouts, no theatrics, only presence, only power. The cameras followed her out into the night, the flashbulbs igniting like stars. And as the doors closed behind her, the last image the dynasty saw was the back of the woman they had mocked, walking away with everything. Justice didn't come with noise. It came with certainty, and Selah Monroe had just written it into history.